a lot of discussions in Adala as a leading human rights center on behalf of Palestinians, Arab citizens of Israel, on whether to challenge, to constitutionally challenge this law. Because the dilemmas were on a lot of fronts. The first one was, what would it differ between the situation before and the situation after, taking into consideration that Israel has all the time been considered as a Jewish and democratic state, considering that previous basic laws, which have a constitutional status, what Chaim called principal laws, basic laws, that have been interpreted as a constitution by the Israeli Supreme Court, have anchored among themselves the definition of Israel, the principles of the constitution being defining Israel as a Jewish and democratic state. A lot of the interpretations that the court, the Israeli Supreme Court, had provided to major principal issues that relate to the right of the Arab minority inside of Israel related to this dual component of Israel as a Jewish and democratic state, and it affected the legal status of the Arab minority. One of the most important, or I can say even two main examples, but one of them is related to the political participation of Arabists in the Knesset elections. That have all the time been, almost every election, they have been challenged by Knesset committees that basically decided in more than one case regarding more than one Arab political party or Arab nominees that they have worked before, or that their political message is basically promoting the revocation and the destruction of the definition of Israel as a Jewish and democratic state. One tangible, clear example was when the Arab Democratic Party, Tajammu or Balad, headed then by former MK Azmi Bishara, ran the election, and their political message was state for all citizens, which basically means equality for all citizens. They were disqualified based on the article, they were disqualified by the Knesset based on an article in an existing basic law, again like a constitution, which said that if you are destructing or promoting to destruct the definition of Israel as a Jewish and democratic state, then you cannot participate in the election. And the argument or the ideology or political platform basically of the party working for equality for all citizens or state for all citizens is basically working to provide equality to everyone. So there will be no Jewish state. They were disqualified, we challenged that, we succeeded, but it was all under the frame of what a Jewish and democratic state of Israel is. And then throughout the last few years, we have seen an intensive wave of anti-democratic laws that have been targeting directly or indirectly the Palestinian citizens in Israel, whether it is the Nakba law. I'm not sure, are you all familiar with the it will then take more than 20 minutes, so I will try to make it very short. But in the past, let's say 10 years, there have been massive legislation passed by the Israeli parliament targeting different rights that are related to the Palestinian minority inside of Israel. One of them is the Nakba law, for example. We call it the Nakba law, which basically provides sanctions on every state-funded NGO or state-funded institution that would want to commemorate the events of the 1948 that the Palestinians called Nakba, or it's called also the catastrophe. So it is the Palestinian collective history of what we call, from our point of view, the war that happened between Palestine or the Palestinians and the Jews in 1948 that led to the establishment of the State of Israel. Basically, one of the arguments that was provided and argued by the state in the court, and I litigated this case, was basically that this law is legitimate because anyone who wants to commemorate the Nakba as a Nakba, and even mention the word Nakba, delegitimizes the existence of the State of Israel as a Jewish and democratic state. We were dismissed by the Supreme Court for some reasons that are not related to the merits of the case, but because they basically said we don't have a concrete case in order to provide judicial review. But what I'm trying to say through providing these examples is if the Jewishness of the State of Israel was a major factor on a political, not only on a political level, but also on a constitutional level in the Supreme Court. So what does the Jewish nation-state law differ? It differs a lot. Because this law, for the first time, is a very dangerous step on a constitutional level, decides and imposes a constitutional identity on everyone living not only in Israel, but also in the West Bank and being occupied based on international law as well, and in the Golan Heights. The Jewish nation-state law doesn't decide what the borders of the State of Israel is, but it says in Eretz Israel, which basically includes the West Bank. It also says that in this area that is defined as the State of Israel, the right to self-determination will be exclusive for the Jewish people only. Now, this exclusiveness of the right to self-determination, the right to self-determination is very crucial because it has two components. One applies on the West Bank and basically negates any kind of ability to claim a nation state for Palestinians in the West Bank. So it basically comes and provides a major obstacle for any kind of peace solution that would result or probably result in establishing an independent Palestinian state. Because if the Palestinians will have, that are in the West Bank, have no right to self-determination, then basically there will not be any ability to talk about self-determination, about the right to have a state in the West Bank for the Palestinians. But on another hand, it also has an effect for the Palestinians living inside of Israel, because the international law defines the self-determination not only as a right to have a nation state, not only as a right of groups to have their own autonomy or have their own borders within a nation or a specific nation, but it also is defined as giving the right for every group, even if they are living within an already existing nation, the right to every group to decide their own destiny, even on a daily basis in terms of what their education would be, the housing, the ownership on land and property, the allocation of budgets, anything or any definition of what destiny would be. And here comes the Jewish nation-state law, and basically says that the Jews are ethnically superior. It basically comes and creates a principle of ethnic supremacy over anything that who is, or anyone that who is not Jewish. So this is one crucial point. The other crucial point is that because the right to self-determination is exclusive only for the Jews, including inside of Israel, this basically says that the right to equality is not only under risk, but it basically doesn't exist. So this law basically throughout, and Chaim, correct me if I'm wrong because you were in the process in the Knesset and I wasn't, we were just observing it from the outside in order to say to see what the outcome will be. But all the discussions around including and mentioning the right to equality as a constitutional right in this law were all dismissed for the obvious reasons. Because if equality will be included, then there will be no Jewish supremacy, which was the goal of this law. But this also means that equality has been not only cancelled, but equality has been basically, the right to equality doesn't exist anymore. It is not a constitutional value or right anymore. And instead of that, the principle of discrimination based on ethnicity had become a constitutional value based on this law. So the problem is now that, and this I would get now here to my first question, what does it differ? If before we were able to go to the Supreme Court and challenge all the different types of discrimination, whether on individual level or on a group level, claiming that there is a breach for the right of equality. It doesn't matter what kind of field, whether it's political participation, whether it's education, social, economic, property, land, it doesn't matter, but the essence and the core of the basis of our petitions and argument before the Supreme Court was basically relying on the constitutional right of equality. Now, there is a huge question mark on our ability to raise arguments of equality in the Supreme Court in light of this law. Instead, discrimination is encouraged. Discrimination is a constitutional value. There probably will be more and more laws that will come and implement the Jewish supremacy value that has been entrenched in this law. And we only need now to observe what the consequences of this law in terms of how it will be enforced in order to implement the Jewish supremacy. The other point that I want to address is the citizenship issue. In spite of the fact that there are citizenship laws in Israel from 1952 that define who is a citizen, we are not here, the Jewish nation-state law basically lacks any narrative or any wording of not only equality, but also Arabs, Palestinians, and who is a citizen. In terms of, not in terms of the identity, but not in terms of the definition of who is entitled for citizenship, because this already exists from the law of 1952, but in terms of the status of who is the we, the people, of a constitution. Every constitution in the world, especially those who have been created after the Second World War, have defined in the constitution who we, the people, are. We, the people of South Africa, we, the people of the United States, we, the French people, we, the Macedonian people. And then the constitution comes and defines who is the nation comprised from, who are the components of who the nation. Now, why this is important? Because the expectation of who is a part of this nation, basically, is important in order to enable the acknowledgement of the inclusion component of all the rules within the Constitution. If you're not regarded as part of the nation, basically your citizenship, even if you have citizenship on an official paper level, like I do, you will not be counted as on a constitutional level because you are part of the nation. So basically you cannot be part of decision making on a constitutional level. You cannot be part of deciding what your destiny is. You cannot have expectation that you will get protection from the state because you are not part of the nation. And there have been a lot of examples throughout the history of the crucial and dangerous consequences when some groups have not been included and acknowledged and recognized within a constitution. Two major examples that I would like to provide are from France, and the second is from the United States. In France, you told me 2 minutes. Are you just kidding me? But I promise I will make it short. So the constitution in France after the revolution, when even they had passed the Bill of Rights, which we all should know about, it's one of the most important constitutions that started the concept of the modern human rights and Bill of Rights. They didn't include women, they didn't include workers, and they didn't include basically slaves. And these three groups ended up working for almost a decade, a little bit less, in order to be able to include themselves and be acknowledged on a constitutional level. Why? Because the fact of excluding them from we the nation or we the people ended up passing policies, plans, laws that eventually led to racism against them and ended up with constitutional legitimacy of discriminating against them. The same was in the United States. There was a famous law, there was a famous Supreme Court in the early 20th century, Dred Scott it's called, which basically challenged the exclusion of black persons from the US Constitution, and the Supreme Court unfortunately gave legitimacy to that and said we the people are basically the white people and slaves and blacks are not included. It also continued to give, because of this court decision, it continued to give legitimacy to segregation, racial segregation. So basically, if we're not there, then we are invisible, and we are, I can't say first-class citizens and second-class citizens, because I don't think that, I wouldn't say it in this classification, but constitutional classification basically here is a huge matter in terms of the meaning and the value of citizens. And this is also important to state, because the Palestinian minority have been regarded, even in one Supreme Court decision previously, which was provided in 2000, that the Palestinian minority is the largest national minority that have been living here before the state of Israel. This case, or this reasoning, was given in the Supreme Court, Israeli Supreme Court, in a petition that we filed against mixed towns and cities in order to add the Arabic language on signs, claiming that, first of all, the Arabic language is an official language because we are a national minority and we should be acknowledged, but also out of the right to equality. And the petition was accepted because of the right to equality rather than the issue of acknowledging our group rights. So I'm going to end, but I'm going to also say that there are additional dangerous components to this law that basically give legitimacy to segregation in housing. It gives legitimacy to establishing towns for Jews only, providing a lot of benefits or providing any kinds of benefits for Jews only, even if these towns might accept Arabs living in them, but any kinds of benefits or any kind of services are basically, or should be basically provided on a Jewish supremacy issue, or Jewish supremacy value. I will now end up really by saying that all these components that I have talked about, including, and most importantly, the exclusiveness of the self-determination to Jews only on the one hand, and negating the right to equality on another hand, making discrimination as a constitutional value, and thus encouraging institutionalized discrimination, racism, domination, exclusion based on national and ethnic supremacy, basically meets the definition in international law of what apartheid is, which also is regarded as a war crime. And so, from our point of view, we are not talking only about equality and discrimination. We are also talking here about changing the character of Israel to what it truly is.